Okay, so today's topic is about building your paper structure. And Gina and I got together this summer and we brainstormed, well, what are the outcomes? Like, what should you hopefully learn from this session? And that's what's on the board up front. We came up with 7 items. And as I was kind of thinking about the workshop yesterday, it occurred to me that I was going to talk about one of my items, out of order. So I'm going to start with item number 6, which is constructing a works cited and reference page. And the reason for that is a lot of times when I work with students and they're doing research, that's what they wait until the end to do. Have any of you guys had that experience where you write your paper and you do your bibliography after you've written your paper? Yeah. And have any of you had the experience where it's late at night and you're trying to track down where did I find that from and where was that article and what was that? Okay, so a lot of you are nodding your heads. So to try to save you time and angst, I would highly recommend that you switch that process. And the reason for that is that often, if you're in a course where you're writing a paper, it's at least here, it's usually an English course or a history course or a psych course, and many, not all, but many of our instructors will break your assignments down into manageable chunks. So most of our instructors don't say, your paper's due in 4 weeks, good luck. They will often say, okay, first, give me your topic. Then give me 3 to 5 resources. Then give me an outline or give me your thesis statement. Or does that sound familiar to some of you from some of your courses? So often if you are starting to pick your topic, in order to really be educated about your topic, to figure out like, can I really write a 3-page, 5-page, 10-page paper, you need to dig in and start finding some resources, because if you've picked a topic and there's not enough information, it will be really hard for you to write the 10 pages. So you're already in looking for articles, looking for print books, looking for ebooks, looking for websites. And so my recommendation is start a file right away where you capture that information. So if you're on a web page, if nothing else, copy the URL at the top, and open up a Word document, throw that in there, put the date, if that's the bare minimum of what you do, or print out the website and write information on it, okay? So that would be the first thing. If you're in any of our resources, using our journal articles, using our ebooks, make sure you're capturing that information. And so the thing that I'm gonna show you is on the library's page, and you will find those of you that come to all of this, there will be some repetition of some parts of this, because as you're writing a paper and as we broke it up into segments, it all overlaps. And so we're teaching them as standalone, but if you come to all of them, there'll be some repetition. So this part I've already shown. Right here is the GBCC Library Citation Guide. And the couple of things that I want to point out that are on here, under Citation Tools, if you click on this tab, we link you to a few different things. One is a website, Son of Citation Machine, which, how many of you guys use EasyBib? Yeah, most of our students I find are using EasyBib. Do any of you use bibme.org? Couple?
APA, right?
Yes. And then Son of Citation Machine. Those are the 3 that I find most of our students use. Most of our students are using EasyBib. However, EasyBib does not do APA format. Son of Citation Machine does do APA format. EasyBib, it says it will charge you. Don't pay. Go to Son of Citation Machine. So you can create your citations, and then the other thing that's on here is how to use the tools that are built into Microsoft Word to create your references. So it does require you to be a little bit organized on the beginning part of your paper, but I highly recommend, as you're kind of starting to do your search, just grab that information, organize it whatever way makes sense to you. I personally would probably open up one Word document, title it sources or references or works cited page, depending on whatever style you're using or whatever makes sense to you, and then just start throwing things on there. Even if you don't get it in exact order, if you don't have it polished and ready to turn in, you will have the components so that after you write your paper, you're not pulling out your hair saying, I can't find that website again, and that's got, you know, critical information that I've used, or I can't find that article again in EBSCO, where did I find it? Okay, so that's what my recommendation would be, is to start with that before you actually get into writing your paper. Okay, and the last piece that I'll say about this, if you ever have questions about how to cite in MLA, APA, or Chicago style, that you can certainly go to the Writing Center, or you can come to the library. Fran and I are both the librarians down here. Either one of us are happy to sit with you. We can answer a very specific targeted question. If you say, I've got a streaming video, how do I cite that in APA style? We can answer that. Or we can take a look at your list of all your resources and make sure that you've got it set up in the correct format. So again, that's where if you gather those early, you have time to have another set of eyes look at them and make sure everything's set up correctly before you turn it in and have points taken off. Yes?
So if we're catching something on a website, just copy and paste the URL, would that
Yes.
be enough to get back and
Yes.
get help with the rest of it?
Yep. And if you use the tool Son of Citation Machine, that's usually where you'll start. Most of the websites that create citations for you, it will ask some basic information, you'll plug it in, and then it will create your citation for you. Sometimes it will ask more questions. So if you plug in the URL of the website you're on, it might be able to populate a lot of the fields, but it might say to you, is there an author? Who published it? What year was it so it might ask you to do some digging to plug in more information before it creates a citation for you.
You have to be careful with EasyBib though, because they don't do the hanging indent.
And you know what, that's another good point, is a lot of these will not do a hanging indent, or if the website creates it with the hanging indent, which people don't know what the hanging indent is, that's where the first line sticks out and every other line gets tabbed in. If the website does that and you copy and paste it into Word, often it strips that out and it will left justify it. If you don't correct that and you turn it in, you'll have points taken off because that's not accurate. And there are tools in Word that will quickly fix that. The way that you can find those tools is again on our citation guide. If you go to APA or MLA style, either one of those tabs, it will give you a link here to the citation format handout that we've created, and it's the link right above where it says created by GBCC Library. You click on that, and then within the body of these handouts on the second page, it shows you how do you fix the hanging indent. And believe me, if nothing else, if you get nothing else from today than this will save you time knowing how to fix that in Word, because otherwise you'll fight with it. Okay? And so the last piece is just, if you do need our help, whoops, I'm going to go back to, let's see here. If you do want some help from the library, when you're on the library's website, if I can get back to, here we go. If I go back to the library's website, you can use this tool to create a research appointment request with us. You can call us or you can email us, and we'll sit down. If you just need us to kind of look over your paper for citation, it's not going to take half an hour. You can email us your paper, you can bring it in print, or if you just have specific questions, we can answer those. Any questions for me about that part? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Gina, and I'm going to come around. Also, as I'm coming around, I've got folders and pens. If those of you have not been here last week, we've got some goodies.
I'm also going to just pass out a quick handout if you just take one and pass them down your row. And we're not going to talk about this right away because I, like Becky, am going to sort of not talk about the outcomes in order. Because I think that we mentioned last week, with writing itself, I mean, we have all these great steps we can follow, but in general, I think we'll find that writing is a messy process. So some of us will have a thesis that really changes a lot as we continue to read, research, draft, construct an outline. Some of us will have done a lot of research before we came to that thesis statement, so it may change a little bit, but not a ton as we read and research. And some of us really like the pre-writing formal Roman numeral type outline, and others of us will prefer to, will prefer to start drafting and then maybe use a reverse outline tool, which I will show you today. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about a thesis statement, which we talked a little bit about last week, but I'm just going to multitask for a minute, bring up a couple of things I want to show you. All right, so basically, a thesis statement is the backbone of the essay, right? Whether it's APA, MLA, Chicago, it's the backbone of a research essay. So it's a central idea that requires supporting evidence. And those words supporting evidence are very important, because when it comes to forming a thesis statement, you know, we don't want it to be too broad or too vague, or we want it to be focused and specific. We talked last week, we want it to be grounded, narrowed, and I'm going to give you a couple examples here, okay? We talked a little bit about research questions before coming to the thesis, which is a statement or an answer to a question, right? It's more of an assertion, it's a type of argument, it's a declaration, it's a main idea. These are all synonymous terms, right, for basically what the author has come to the page to say in this essay and what will be explored here. So for instance, say your research question is this. Should employers monitor their employees' online activities in the workplace? Okay. Here's a tentative thesis statement. Employers should not monitor their employees' online activities because electronic surveillance can compromise workers' privacy. So, as you'll see, the answer is forming an opinion of a kind, but it's not an opinion that cannot be backed up by scientific evidence or academic resources from scholarly journals, right? Do we see that? And one thing I'll recommend a lot of times when students come to the Writing Center and say, I just can't come up with my thesis statement, is I'll recommend, and again, this is not black and white where you absolutely have to do this, but I'll recommend integrating these words should and because. The reason being, the word should will get you to form a declaration or an argument or an assertion, and the word because will get you to come up with reasons why that you'll then have as sort of subtopics throughout your paper, or the reasons that your research will be backing up. You know, here are my reasons and this is how I'm going to prove them with this research that I'm getting from these scholarly sources. So then here's that revised thesis, even more focused, because as we learn and read and research and become experts on our subject, our thesis statement will change, right? So although companies often have legitimate concerns that lead them to monitor employees' internet usage, from expensive security breaches to reduced productivity, the benefits of electronic surveillance are outweighed by its costs to employees' privacy and autonomy. So here we have an even more focus. So we're seeing the process that this sample student is going through. You know, here's my tentative thesis. Now as I read and research, I learn more and it becomes even sharper and more focused. And I have these specifics that I can back up throughout my essay. And maybe I can show the opposing side of the argument, but then come back as if I'm on almost a debate team. Not that it needs to be that aggressive, but if you show the opposing side of an argument, the opposite of what your thesis is, you can then come back and defend your thesis even more or prove it throughout your essay by saying, well, you might be thinking this, but I can counteract it. Is that making sense to people? Okay, so a thesis is very, very important, obviously, but again, it will change as you go. So there's that. I have a lot of things, probably too many. Okay, oftentimes, so what I'm bringing up here is a sample research essay, because what better way, this is MLA, and I do have a sample APA one. How many people are writing MLA papers? How many APA? Okay, how many Chicago? Okay, it's just good for me to know so I can kind of gear it toward you a little bit. So this is an MLA one. There is also an APA sample that I can bring up and show you. But basically what I'm focusing on here is the thesis, which is going to be very, very similar in MLA or APA, and just different things. We can talk about the introduction a little bit, the conclusion. So as you'll see, as far as the outcomes go, I'm sort of jumping around as well. But what better way, to see how all of these things are actually put into the context of a work than to look at a sample. So this is classic MLA format with, the last name and page number at the top right. You'll see with APA, it's the title and the page number, title of the essay, but we'll talk more about that, but just so you can kind of see the difference. APA often has the title page, whereas we do not have that in MLA. Again, every instructor might be a little different, so obviously, first and foremost, follow the assignment that your instructor gives, but that will generally be the case. Title page with APA, not so with MLA. So here's the title of the essay, A Call to Action, Regulate Use of Cell Phones on the Road. So the title of the essay, whether APA, MLA, Chicago, is going to represent the topic of the essay, right? So the topic is something you can say in a phrase. It is not a complete sentence the way the thesis statement is. And the thesis statement can be 2 sentences too. We say 1 to 2 sentences, but more often it is 1 sentence. And most of the time, it is really, really helpful, and we recommend placing it as the last sentence of that first paragraph. So this first paragraph here is a sample introduction, okay? Because one of our outcomes today is to talk about introductions and conclusions and how to make them effective. So we'll take a quick look at this paragraph. So we want to hook our reader with the beginning, right? With the beginning of the essay. So we want to try and connect with them right off the bat. When a cell phone goes off in a classroom or at a concert, we are irritated, but at least our lives are not endangered. So something that, most people can relate to in the general public, but then we have this really, really potent statement, at least our lives are not endangered. And that's indicating that the author is about to talk about something a bit more serious, right, than the cell phone going off at a concert and being irritated. When we are on the road, however, irresponsible cell phone users are more than irritating. They're putting our lives at risk. So here's this declarative sentence. Many of us have witnessed drivers so distracted by dialing and chatting that they resemble drunk drivers, weaving between lanes, for examples, or nearly running down pedestrians in crosswalks. A number of bills to regulate use of cell phones on the road have been introduced in state legislators, and the time has come to push for their passage. Regulation is needed because drivers using phones are seriously impaired and because laws on negligent and reckless driving are not sufficient to punish offenders. So one thing I particularly like about these samples, and this you can get by Googling Diana Hacker sample research essay, and you can either put APA or MLA, and they'll both come right up. So you can access these on your own if you're interested. The OWL, is everyone familiar with the OWL online writing lab at Purdue University that we say is very, the most up-to-date, and we recommend a lot in the library and up in CAPS, also has sample papers. So, feel free to use what works for you, but those are 2 good sources. But what I like is, see in the right-hand margin how they're telling us, because it's the sample paper, opening sentences catch readers' attention. Then that last sentence, thesis asserts Angela Daly's main point. She's the student, right? So that thesis statement is regulation is needed because, we have that word because, giving the reason, right? Drivers using cell phones are seriously impaired and because laws on negligent and reckless driving are not sufficient to punish offenders. So that by that last statement, it's giving us kind of the push off into the rest of the paper as readers that, okay, this is what this woman is going to, or this student is going to prove throughout the essay with scholarly sources and the research she's done, okay? So, I just want to give a couple more examples of thesis statements, one from MLA, one from APA. You'll see I sort of jump around, but there are common threads. And I do have handouts at the end if anyone's interested and struggling with writing a thesis statement. I'll just leave them up here and you can, you're more than welcome to come up, and I have answer keys. So if you want to practice writing thesis statements and seeing, the best way to go about that, maybe that'll be helpful to you, hopefully. So here's two different thesis statements, right? Residents of the District of Columbia must pay federal income taxes along with their own local income taxes, even though they are denied voting representation in the United States Congress. Okay. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thesis statement or a correct thesis statement, but this is a sample, right? And so kind of sit with that for a second and then listen to this one. Residents of the District of Columbia should fight for voting representation in Congress with every means available. Media campaigns, pressure for a constitutional amendment, and court action. Which one would you say is the better thesis statement? The second one. Great. The reason being, the first one's doing what? Anyone? It's just giving facts, right? It's just saying these people must pay federal income taxes. It's not giving us the assertion that the second one is giving us, especially with that word should, right? The residents should fight for voting representation, and this is why. And this is how they should do it specifically. So the assertion is in the second one, and that can be developed throughout the paper. Whereas the first one, the fact can't be, okay? Anyway, is everyone good on the thesis statement? All right, I don't want to overdo things that you're already feeling good about, but I do have those if you need them. Okay. So, the next thing I want to talk about is topic sentences, which is under outcome number 4, understand topic and supporting sentences. So, thinking about how each paragraph of an essay, any essay, creative, research, whatever, is a unit for a reason. It is a cohesive unit because each paragraph is representing a topic or a subtopic, right, throughout your essay. So it's pulled together for a reason. So each paragraph should have a topic sentence. So I do have a little example I want to read to you. Now this is not a research essay, but it's actually a really much easier read than a research essay where we can kind of just think about topic sentences. A good place to put this topic sentence is at the beginning of the paragraph. Do you have to do that? Absolutely not. None of these rules in writing, that's what I mean where I say it's a messy process. They're not black and white. We all learn differently, and if it works for you and you're wanting to make sure, maybe you're struggling with paragraph focus and you want to make sure you have that clear topic sentence, just try putting it at the beginning of the paragraph and then say, okay, all my following sentences in this paragraph are going to support that topic sentence. They're supporting details in the paragraph, okay? And that's a good way to try doing that. So here's a paragraph, right? Although I love movies, I've found that there are drawbacks to movie going. That is the first sentence of the paragraph. That is the topic sentence of the paragraph. So what do you think the rest of the paragraph is going to do? It's going to support this first sentence. Although I love movies, I've found there are drawbacks to movie going, and it's going to explain these are what those drawbacks are for me, and this is why, right? So the rest of the paragraph is, one problem is just the inconvenience of it all. That's one supporting supporting detail that's going to be broken down even to more details. to get to the theater, I have to drive for at least 15 minutes, right? Furthering this idea of inconvenience. Or more if traffic is bad. It can take forever to find a parking spot, and then I have to walk across a huge parking lot to the theater. There I encounter long lines, sold out shows, and ever increasing prices. And I hate sitting with my feet sticking to the floor because of all of other people's spilled snacks. So you can kind of see where this paragraph is going, right? I won't read the entire thing, but it's supporting that first sentence of, here are the drawbacks, here's one inconvenience, and then kind of supporting that. So this is all going to relate back to the outline too, which I won't jump to just yet. But the idea of the outline is, well, what is the topic that I want to explore, you know? And then what are the supporting details underneath it? So then I'm going to indent and put, you know, the capital letter A, whereas the Roman numeral number would have said this is the topic I want to explore, and then everything underneath it is going to be sort of subtopics of that initial topic. Am I going too fast? Okay, good. Sorry. I don't want to be rambling too fast. Okay. So any questions about any of this so far? Okay. So looking at this research essay, I kind of like to keep bringing us back to this research essay, because we can see that here's the topic sentence, right? It says it right there at the top of this paragraph number 2, Daly uses a clear topic sentence. So here's the topic sentence here. No one can deny that cell phones have caused traffic deaths and injuries. And then she goes on to give us these specific events, and we have the citations. Cell phones were implicated in 3 fatal accidents in November 1999 alone. Early in November, 2-year-old Morgan Pina was killed by a driver distracted by his cell phone. So all these details underneath about these like depressing accidents and deaths are supporting that first topic sentence. No one can deny that cell phones have caused traffic deaths and injuries. And this is why no one can deny it, because I'm giving you the proof. Then I'm giving you these in-text citations that are going to correspond. This is something I want to make clear. So best off right here, this is an in-text citation, also called a parenthetical citation. Same exact thing, right? But it's enclosed in parentheses. So that's why we call it in-text. That's why we call it parenthetical citation. But it's in text because it's within the text of your paper. Each of those corresponds with one of the entries on the works cited page, which Becky was talking about, the works cited page. I'm only stressing that because I have found that oftentimes that's getting missed. I don't know in high school or what, but sometimes students aren't clear about that when they come into freshman English. So I just want to make that clear. For every in-text citation, there should be the corresponding entry on the works cited page. So in MLA, you're starting that works cited entry with the author's last name. So if someone was reading your paper or your teacher's reading your paper, they see best off. Okay, I'm going to flip to that works cited page, and what did best off write? And then at the end, we see, oh, best off, because it's in alphabetical order, it's the first citation. Len Bestoff, this is what he wrote, and everyone corresponds, and vice versa. So Becky suggested starting with the works cited page, and then you kind of integrate them within your text as you're writing. Another thing we should mention about this whole in-text citation thing is you are citing within the text of your paper consistently, constantly, when in doubt cite, even when you're using the ideas of the sources, okay? And especially when you're using the ideas of the sources. So what I mean is you can say, well, these are my own words. Why do I have to cite? And it's U.S. copyright laws require us to do this. We are taking information from this person's peer-reviewed scholarly source. So we have to cite. But that can be confusing, especially I think when students are not from the U.S., because this isn't the case everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. So the idea is, and we're going to be talking about this week after next, paraphrasing, summarizing, and integrating direct quotations within the text of our essay. So the direct quotation is when we take that author's words verbatim and say, Bestoff states from that source, word for word, some statistic about these accidents, and it's enclosed in quotation marks. That's a direct quotation. Everything else in your research essay, whether it's APA, MLA, Chicago, is going to be paraphrasing and summarizing. In other words, taking the ideas from the scholarly source and translating it into our own words. And we're going to learn more about the best way to go about doing that in a couple of weeks. We'll be able to go more in depth about it because we only have so much time. Do you want to jump in with anything?
Well, I can just jump in and talk a little bit about the in-text citation and sort of keeping track of your research, integrating your research and evidence. So going back to the example here that Gina gave, so this student has written a paper, and as I scroll through, I'm seeing that there are different citations given. So these correspond with what's at the end of her paper, what I personally recommended that you start with. And this is another area that I see that students sometimes get a little bit in trouble with or have challenges with, and that is you guys will print out, here I'm going to grab that. You guys will print out your articles, you'll read a website, you might print out something from the website, you might have a print book, you might have an ebook, and you're using pieces of it, and you write your paper, but people don't always stay organized about trying to keep track of where they got that information from. So what I highly recommend is, again, as you're going through, as you're reading the articles, do most of you, as you're reading articles to write a paper, do you highlight things and maybe make notes in the margin, or am I the only one that does that? Yeah?
We recommend doing that. Annotating.
Yeah, so, if you, okay, let me put it this way. If you don't do that, then perhaps what you do is you make your statement and then you flip through the article trying to find something that backs up. Okay, I'm seeing some nods. So whatever way, I'm not judging. If that works for you, that's great. But whenever it is that you select something from that article, you need to make sure that you're making a note of it. So if you've got it electronically, most of our resources, you can add a little note to it. If you've got it in print, putting a star next to it, underlining it, something. But you have to keep track, because otherwise, when it comes time to, you actually putting it in this paper, that's where students will sometimes say, oh shoot, I don't remember which article. I read 7 articles, I had 3 websites. Where the heck did I get that quote from? If you, in that moment at 12:30 at night, or 12:30 in the morning, I guess, if you make the decision that I can't remember where I got it, I'm not going to worry about it, that is plagiarism, and that equals at least a 0 on your paper, if not failing the course. So it's very serious. So that's why it's just helpful to try to stay organized right from the beginning, to keep track of where is it that you're pulling that information from. Okay, worst case scenario, again, stop in and see me. I had a student that brought in a paper for me to look at. The first few pages, or first few paragraphs, she had her correct citations. Last few were done correctly. The whole middle part of her paper, there were no citations. And I said, well, this is all plagiarized. What's up with this? The first few paragraphs, it was from one source. The last few paragraphs, it was one source. In the middle, she merged from like 3 or 4 different sources, and she just didn't remember where she grabbed it from. And so I sat with her and I said, well, let's pull up your articles, let's look at the website, and let's go paragraph by paragraph and sentence by sentence to figure out what were your words, what were somebody else's words, and where did we find that word, what is it compared to. That's really tedious to go about it that way. It's possible, but you don't want to be doing that. And she had to turn her paper in late. So, just if you can try to stay organized about what you're pulling from the beginning, even if it is just that, okay, well, I wrote my paragraph, now I need something catchy to back it up, I'm going to flip through, here's something in the article that corresponds. Grab it right then and there, make a note. Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. I see students in those sticky situations all the time, usually near the deadline, where I have no idea where I got this. Now I have to go back and look, and I completely agree with what Becky's saying. And I'm going to talk more about this week 4, I think it's, that we talk about paraphrasing, avoiding plagiarism, summarizing, direct quotations. And to go along with what Becky was saying, I recommend when you're taking your notes, not only to absolutely keep track of which source each one is from, like maybe have a different section of your notebook for each source, and when you take your notes, be translating it into your own words right from the beginning. Because I see students who say, oh, well, I'm going to turn it into my own words later, and they're copying word for word or pasting things from an article, and I'm going to change that later, I'm going to change that later. And it's the most time-consuming, I would say, other than the researching and reading process, it's the most time-consuming part, translating that into your own words. And the way to do it is not to look at the source and look at your notebook and translate it, and we'll talk more about that, because then we do end up sometimes plagiarizing unintentionally. Most students are plagiarizing unintentionally when they are doing it. And so they're patch writing, what I mean by that is kind of like, oh, I replaced this word and this word and this word, but the sentence structure is still the same, and there's too many of the same words from that original source, and you're getting yourself into a dangerous area doing that. So if you can translate it into your own words from the beginning, really sit with that information, read your sources several times, highlight, put Post-its with notes, any way you can kind of highlight what it is you want to translate, and translate it right into your notebook, know exactly where that source is coming from, and then later you're going to organize it in a logical fashion for structuring the essay. You'll just avoid so much time wasting, really, and stress. It's a lot of stress. So, what else?
Outline.
Outline.
Conclusions.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the introduction. We'll talk about the conclusion, and then we'll move on to the outline, okay? So, and here, this essay has a picture. I mean, again, it's always what your instructor says. Some instructors will say absolutely not. I definitely wouldn't include a picture to take up page space, because that is just a dead giveaway to the instructor that that's what we're trying to do. So, we're excited. Oh, okay. So conclusion is our last paragraph of the essay, right? So we read the beginning, we know what this thesis is, right? So kind of trying to sum things up in the conclusion without repeating ourselves. And I like to think of conclusions, my metaphor for conclusions is closing a door but opening a window. And what I mean by that is you're wrapping things up, but you do not need to repeat what you've already stated, in the introduction. You do not need to feel like you have to say the exact same thing. You want to wrap things up, but it doesn't necessarily need to be with this like neat little bow, like you're tying up, you wrapped a present and you're tying it up with a neat little bow. You want to keep the reader kind of thinking about this topic. You want to leave the reader affected after the essay, because that's sort of a successful essay. Like, yeah, this person's making a good point, and I'm going to think more about this. And maybe I want to look more into the sources that this person used. Oh, there's the works cited. I can do that. So, okay, let's look at the conclusion. Because of mounting public awareness of the dangers of drivers distracted by phones, state legislators must begin to take the problem seriously. So this is what needs to be done still, right? Like, that's what I mean. It's not being wrapped up with a neat little bow. It's kind of like this is some topic for further thinking. Now we have a direct quote. We know this because it's enclosed in the quotation marks that this is the author of that source's words verbatim. It's definitely an issue that is gaining steam around the country, says Matt Sundin of the National Conference of State Legislators. You'll see in that in-text citation, that's an indirect quote, so it's a quote that was quoted in a source. So we'll talk more about that when time permits, but it's telling us exactly who said it, but who quoted that author, okay? Lon Anderson of the American Automobile Association agrees. Another direct quotation. There is momentum building, he says, to pass laws. The time has come for states to adopt legislation restricting the use of cell phones in moving vehicles. So again, we're kind of, driving that argument home, but hopefully provoking our reader to think a little bit, because hopefully we've engaged the reader to the point where we've explored this from different types of sides, and we've taught the reader something, and we've learned something by writing, and hopefully they'll keep thinking about it. And you'll find that a lot of your instructors say, you can't write about abortion, and you can't write about the death penalty. And the reason being is because they don't want things sometimes that have been sort of beaten to death with controversy. So you want to kind of show your reader different sides of things, what's worth exploring. How can I do this differently? What do I have to say about this that's different than what's been said before? It's a good way to think about it. And then the outline. I gave you the handout of the Roman numeral pre-writing outline, and we don't have time to go over that, but it's a good example of kind of, here are some topics. It gives you the tentative thesis at the beginning, which is helpful. So it's a great idea to have a tentative thesis at the top of your outline, and then say, what main topics do I want to explore, and what are some subtopics underneath this that are going to help me back up that initial topic, because what am I finding in my research that supports that topic, okay? One thing I like to talk about really quickly is the reverse outline, which you can find on OWL. I'm a huge fan of this. And what it is it's more of the outline after you've done some drafting, and it's really easy to do, but it does take, some time, but it's really well worth it. Basically what you do is, say you even have like 2 pages of your draft of your essay. It's telling you in the left-hand margin, okay, and you can get this by Googling reverse outline OWL, okay, an exercise for taking notes and revising your work. So again, you might do this at the beginning, you might do this later, kind of just depends how you work. So number 1, in the left-hand margin of your essay, write down the topic of each paragraph. This is going to help you with paragraphing and topic sentences. Each paragraph needs a topic. If you can't come up with a topic for each paragraph, that paragraph probably needs work. Maybe it's underdeveloped. Maybe it needs to be added to another paragraph. Maybe it needs to be moved, which you kind of find out. I'm sorry, I'm rushing. In the right-hand margin, write down how the paragraph topic advances the overall argument. In other words, on the right-hand side of your paper, answer the question, how is this paragraph supporting my thesis? So how is this topic on the left-hand side of my paper, of that paragraph, supporting my thesis on the right-hand side? If it's not, maybe it's not a paragraph you want to have. So check that out. For the sake of time, sorry. Thank you everyone for listening.